and we know it's whimsical, amazing, incredible provenance. It's provenance. This is interesting. There are those two works, which I'm sure Karel will talk to, but they are featured in one of the major publications and are in a UCLA collection. And this is Anna visiting one of her beloved works at Wits Art Museum. She phoned and she said, I've got to go see it. And I just watched her as she touched her person. For Anna, her sculptures were her people. Stella Net, her daughter, at her 80th birthday party, spoke about her siblings. They were the sculptures. So just watching her lovingly touching her person who had left her, but was safe at Wits. And this is Anna and Karel. Anna booked this work. Karel might mention that. She booked this work, she couldn't be there, and it's quite the most glorious Karel Nel will ever imagine. Recently sold. And there's our very young Karel. He's still beautiful and young. 1980s and 90s, trained analyst, trendsetter, art and design connoisseur, fashionista, and food fabulista. They all wrote about her, you couldn't help it. So she was in Fair Lady, she was in style, nothing but the best. She was in style again. And again, well, it's the same feature. And this one, I mean, that's quite a feat of photography. Sunday Times Inside Magazine, I don't know if one of those people who was there at the time instigated this article, who's here now. Charmaine. And then there were, of course, the social pages. So this one's one of my favorites. The Sunday Times Magazine Best Dressed Women. There's Anna next to Marianne and other design aficionados and Karen Roos. There were only 9 of them that year. This year Edith Venter made the front page, and Anna featured in a feature about Elzbieta Resenworth's fashion, her work. And on the Who's Who, she was there, of course. And now finally, to sum up with some of my favorite shots. Again, ChatGPT helped me with a photophoric celebration. When we were planning this exhibition, Wilhelm said we need colour, we need Anna's colours, and Wouter, who is a decorator, said he'd go off and choose the colours. Anna was very well known for her passion for the Yves Saint Laurent number 48, which is discontinued, that lipstick. Whenever any one of us, and I'm looking at some of us in the room, went overseas, we had to get her lipstick and her Guerlain, Eau de Bleu, I think. Thank you. I hated it. The lipstick I adored, but that smell. Anyway, I think I'm wearing it. But anyway, Wouter managed to flawlessly match the Yves Saint Laurent. It lives, and they luckily decided to call it Strauss pink, Starke pink. So a couple of photographs just to close, or a pile of them. Anna at her 80th with the Captain of Industry, a very early photograph a photograph I took of her through one of her sculptures in 2013, I'm getting confused. Yeah, she is with a dear friend, Kim, who passed away 2 weeks after she did. I don't know if he's got any friends in the room here. But they remained in touch and sent each other messages. He's much younger than her, but sent each other messages. Right up until they both died. One of my favorites. Anna never smoked. Okay? She really didn't smoke. She hid her cigarettes. She made people hide her cigarettes in drawers across the apartment. And then when she had a hankering, we had to all go find the cigarette. But she didn't smoke. Here she is with, I'm not sure that he's here, but here she is at her celebration at Graham's Gallery. There she is, just being flamboyant at 33 Melbourne. And she bought a work that I wanted on the left, and that's at the entrance there with Colin Maswangani, which Karel curated actually. But this was Anna. It was the fun, it was the life, it was the whimsy, it was taking nothing seriously, shrieking with delight and screaming when somebody walked past her and she didn't like them and she just said something nasty to them, and that was it. So we had fun. We would put masks on the works of art. They lived, we lived. And most importantly, some of you have spent Nicolaus every December. We celebrated. She covered each one of these 150 plus sculptures with glitter or lights. My absolute favorite is this one. And then we'd eat. And on our last one, there were a few people who were in the room here. You work out which one is Wilhelm and which one is Karel and which one is me and which one is Kevin. But we all held up a plate in front of us and took our portraits. And then Anna and her cats. She called them her catses. She had a number and then they gradually died off. And poor Mangaliso died body in the beginning of this year. And for Anna that meant the end of her life. And I just felt very strongly it couldn't be. But what will I do if I get a new cat? Fortunately, a dear friend stepped in and gave her his cat, who was called Ruby, but we weren't allowed to know that. Ruby was renamed Habibi after a very dear friend of hers and ours who was very young and died and was from Lebanon, and everybody called each other Habibi. So Habibi lived with Anna until Anna's last breath and in the apartment for a few days afterwards until she returned home to being Ruby for some of us, otherwise Ruby. That was Anna. That was just one of the meal, one plate in the evening. Color, taste, texture, smell. This is Anna enjoying it. And this is Anna with shrieks of delight. You could give her anything, whatever was young and whimsical, and I would normally give to a 10-year-old. There wasn't a 10-year-old, so it got given to Anna. And when we started cleaning out the apartment and it's still full, there were just piles of amazing whimsical gifts from all of us to our beloved Anna. She was and is and will remain forever young and forever delighted. She'll be to those of us, to all of us, forever utterly Anna. The two pictures on the side were at Kevin, where she dressed up for the evening and then proceeded to really flourish and show us her magnificent legs. So finally, some personal shots. And just to say, when I got to this moment last night, I've been holding it together for 4 weeks. I was sitting alone in her apartment, having taken a few more photographs, and I got to this, and the gates were opened up. But I have to say, we've always loved Anna, we always will love Anna. She's in our lives, she will always be in our lives. And she must, she finished all of her Starcke realities with Korzo. She even had a section where she said an imperfect vocabulary and she translated from various local languages into English, but she always ended with Korzo. So, Hambagashle Korzo, amazing Anna. And a couple more shots of dear Mangalisa. Thank you all for celebrating our amazing Anna with us.
Thanks, Kathy. If you would please at the back, if you can't hear me, if you would just wave, because there's nothing more irritating than coming to hear somebody speak and not hearing them. Kathy, thank you so much for sharing the kaleidoscopic life of Anna. And we just see how rich it was, and in so many ways how she integrated herself into the very heart of Johannesburg. She migrated from Cape Town the other way, you know. We see how everybody is migrating to Cape Town. Anna moved from her European ancestry into contemporary Africa by coming to Johannesburg. And I was fortunate to meet her through Hope Eglinton. Hope was at Vitorino Meneghelli's gallery called Primitive Art and Antiquities in Johannesburg. And Hope was a very interesting figure in her own right. There are no images of her on the internet, and I have no images of her. So, you know, she was from a very different time. She was the let's just so she was the editor of Outlook magazine, which was the major art magazine in South Africa. And she was married to Charles Eglinton, who was the editor of Optima magazine, which was run by Anglo-American. And I only tell you their life story because it really talks to the nature of the society that we were living in. Charles was a writer, a poet, an editor, and he became very disillusioned with the politics in South Africa. And they had a daughter, but he ended up committing suicide. So Hope lost her husband. Her daughter married a young man called Marius Squirn, who was an activist, and who I think he was involved in the planting of the bomb in Johannesburg station. And he ended up in jail for 12 years. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was looked after by Hope. And when Morris came out of prison, he remarried Jeanette, and they fled to Angola. And they had a daughter, and the daughter and Maurice's wife were blown up by the SANDF. So this was the background of Hope Eglinton's life. She was a bit like Simone Signoret. She had this extraordinary emotional capacity of just caring and loving for people. So she was a human magnet at the Meneghelli Gallery. And this is the person who Anna dealt with for many years. Vitorino travels, Vitorino Meneghelli, who had started the two galleries, he was born in Italy. He and his wife came to Johannesburg after the Second World War. Europe was in such a mess, and he'd always wanted to be an artist, but he was an entrepreneur. He eventually set up a furniture factory, making very stylish Italian metal furniture with plastic sort of bindings, and then set up a brush company, which is called Academy, which still exists today. And at the same time, he started to travel in Africa, and we see him here in Mali, in the Bandagara Highlands. And during his life, he he undertook no less than 73 trips into Africa, and was collecting African art and bringing it back to Johannesburg. For most of us in Johannesburg and in South Africa, well, let's put it this way, most South Africans didn't know they lived in Africa. And it was through Vitorino that we started to see African art on the streets of Johannesburg. Of course, there was the major African art dealer and art dealer Egon Gunther, who had started his gallery in the centre of Johannesburg and then moving to Linksfield. So it was this Italian and a German who really brought African art to the public's attention. I got to know Hope, obviously through being in the gallery, but I also got to know Vitorino. And as a schoolboy and as a university student, I started collecting. And I paid off pieces. Vitorino was very good that way to both myself and to Anna. And of course, both our collections grew. And Hope introduced us. And she always spoke about these incredibly stylish dinners and amazingly intelligent people, and that I needed to meet Anna. And so I eventually did meet Anna, which became a lifelong friendship. And there was the shared passion, obviously, in terms of African art. Here you see Vitorino continuing his travels. He and his wife had a home in just outside Venice in Chieriago, and you see them seated in their home. And he had a very fine African art collection which was based in Venice. And so they moved between Johannesburg and Venice. He was also very close friends with quite a number of the avant-garde Italian artists, and he was very influential on Villa because he was introducing him to some of the most contemporary artists working after the war in Italy. So what did happen is Kathy showed the cover of Africa Explores. This was Susan Vogel's exhibition at the New Museum of African Art in New York. And rather than focusing only on classical African art, there was a new interest in looking at contemporary African art and change. And Vogel was an extraordinary scholar, and she undertook a number of exhibitions which started to change the perspective. And certainly we felt that shift in perspective here through Vitorino and Neligali, but also through Wits University, through the work of Anita Nettleton and the development of an African art department in the History of Art section. And with the Wits Art Museum, there was an undertaking with Standard Bank to fund a collection which would be housed at Wits Art Museum, which is still there today, and has been an extraordinary combination of expertise and money that has led to most probably the most important collection of West African and Southern African collections in South Africa. I wanted to just, Kathy's dealt with Anna as a person of this incredibly vibrant life, And I thought I would just like to look at some of the pieces which she chose to collect, because they do reflect on her sensibility and her particular engagement with the South African context that she subsumed herself in. I mean, to enter Anna's apartment was to enter contemporary Africa. It was the most extraordinary apartment in the city. When you stepped in there, you were in Africa now, and Africa's future. And as an economist and as a futures analyst, one felt that total commitment in her life, in the people that she chose to pull together, and in her absolute focus on reading newspapers, watching the news, literally, I mean, every waking hour. And as Kathy mentioned, these piles of newspapers that arrived constantly and were read and internalized and spoken about, and of course ended up in her reports. So we see here a linguist staff. It's Ashanti from Nigeria, and these staffs are associated with the Ashanti royal chieftainships. They were carried by the linguists, and they stood there as a symbol of the office, both of the linguist and of the chief. The staffs were normally surmounted by small carved figures, and in this case, a very beautiful crow. And they often illustrate traditional proverbs, which are significant in terms of the values and the mores of the chief to who the linguist was linked to. So the linguist really was both the spokesman and the representative of the chief. So it's a beautiful object that would be carried with him and would be held in front of the chief when he spoke to him.